So Todd, you took a recent trip down to Fort Eustis, Virginia for an Army Health and Fitness Symposium. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about why the Army is taking a closer look at fitness for its troops and also where this holistic health and fitness H2F concept came from. Why did the Army not do it before?
So in some ways, the Army was doing pieces of this over a couple of decades. So the Army, created, I would say, post 9/11, created soldier wellness centers for like mental health checks and things like that. They were trying for years and really couldn't get it through a way to pass and improve the standard fitness test, which was a pretty simple, push-ups, sit-ups, and 2-mile run, which just really wasn't effectively measuring combat or tactical efficiency. So that was all kind of in the works, in the mix for probably the first 10 or 20 years through this decade almost. And then through a course of a bunch of rising rates of injury, rising rates of substance abuse, sadly rising rates of suicide and suicide attempts and ideation, the Army really kind of took a step back and was looking at kind of how do we hit all this and make it work together? Because before, you would be on a fort, a base installation, and you needed mental health, you went over this part of the installation, or you went out in town. You needed a strength and conditioning trainer, you went to this gym. You needed nutritional help because you were overweight, you went to this particular specialist. Now they kind of brought it all together. So that's the kind of big picture of where it was coming together over the last couple of decades. And then in 2018, the Army created a pilot program for holistic health and fitness. And holistic is kind of the operative term there. It's like an all-around, I call it like a 360 or all-encompassing fitness program. And in that they have mental, sleep, physical, of course, like your PFTs, APFTs, things like that. I'm sorry, the combat fitness test is more appropriate now. And nutrition and spiritual health, like a sense of belonging, sense of purpose. So they were kind of looking at all those together in that pilot in 2018. And beginning in 2020, maybe a little before, they started fielding actual close combat force brigades with these specialists, these staff, and all the equipment they would need to do this kind of training and enhancement.
What are you hearing from average soldiers or your E1s to E4s, E1s to E6s about what this program looks like?
A lot of it seems to be, I'm preventing injuries, I'm improving PT scores, I'm eating healthier. Some of those are anecdotal, individual. We don't have a lot of deep dive data on that. We do have some good data on some other things, kind of interesting things, and some preliminary data on some reports coming out that was really surprising, frankly. But it's a lot of individual I'm finally feeling better, and I'm tying my nutrition and my sleep to my workouts, or I'm seeing better performance on the rifle range because I know to get the right kind of sleep and not be using too much caffeine and make sure I'm not drinking too much alcohol the days before so I can stay focused.
Shifting a little bit, I want to talk also about what you can share from your reporting on the reductions in suicide among soldiers in their units that have incorporated this program, and maybe some other health outcomes that you've been able to see are coming from this program being implemented.
That was the big surprising one for me. I've done some writing and reporting on this program since before it was even an official program, when it was in 2018 when it was a pilot. And every time you talk to an Army senior leader at any conference, on or off the record, you ask them why do you do this? What are you doing this for? It was almost always, in my experience, was injuries, a lot of injuries. Musculoskeletal injuries are a big problem across active, guard, and reserve. We want to improve injury problems and outrates, keep people readiness, keep people lethal and ready, ready to deploy. That's the kind of primary measurement of success there. But data they present, it's preliminary data. It hasn't been peer-reviewed yet. They got a final report coming out toward the end of this fiscal year, so sometime, hopefully by October, they'll be releasing it. They're showing about a 37%, so more than 1/3 reduction in suicides in brigades with H2F staff and resourcing. Simultaneously, the data is showing about the same amount of increase in suicide in brigades without it. So if they weren't improving at all, it would still be a reduction. But you're seeing these lines diverging quite a bit. So where those brigades without the resources are seeing increasing problems, especially even post-pandemic, while on the other side, things have gone down by a third in the suicide category and are continuing to go down below numbers that are pre-pandemic. Now that was the really exciting part and interesting part for me reporting on it. They were showing numbers dipping below 2019 numbers pre-pandemic in substance abuse, in sexual assault, and in suicide or suicidal attempts. And that's all. So we're seeing numbers better now than before the pandemic.
So I'm curious if you could share a little bit more, I don't think we've touched on this yet, about what the H2F program is going to look like for soldiers across the country, how there are differences at different bases, across MOS, things like that.
So I think if you took, say, a unit from Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State and say, like, Fort Campbell, where the 101st is in Kentucky, they're going to have, if they are infantry close combat units typically right now, so they have very similar training schedules. They're going to have the same resources. So they'll have the same, nutrition expert and strength and conditioning coaches and the same kind of programming. They should also have the same SPARCs, they call them, Soldier Performance Centers, which is kind of where all this kind of comes together in almost a gym-like atmosphere with the additional, like I said, the spiritual, the nutrition. They're going to have all the same resources. And they're going to have all the same goals, basically. Like, we want to see reduced musculoskeletal injuries. We want to see improved outcomes with nutrition, better weight management. We want to see better performance on ACFT. So they'll have the same expectations, same resources. Anything in the middle is kind of up to the commander. As long as they're following the kind of broad guidance of the H2F program in the doctrinal manuals, they can kind of do what they want. In fact, there was a pretty interesting presentation by I'm going to blank here. It was one of the parachute infantry regiments, brigade combat teams. They gave a presentation, and they had actually added in a team building portion where they took behavioral health counselors first and didn't quite have the luck they were hoping, but they added on to that in a second phase some of the chaplains. And they started these team building exercises, almost like an outward bound situation. They take, say, a squad or a platoon, I'm not sure the size of the unit, and they give them like a 2-day kind of, almost like a retreat. But not a retreat like, fun, like go get a spa, like a retreat like, you're marching out in the mountains and you're going to go like camp out. You're not doing combat stuff, but you're doing field kind of skills. And they would talk about why they joined the Army, and they would, share stories and like get that bonding aspect. And that was the only thing they did. And this is not a deep scientific study, but there was some data gathered, and they showed severe reduction in substance abuse issues and reduction in basically bad behavior, bad conduct, charges, getting in trouble out in town, things like that. They took other measures, but that's an example where, as part of the fitness, they're seeing this beyond just going and doing push-ups and pull-ups and kettlebell swings. They're also saying, okay, mentally fit, unit cohesion, like how do we kind of incorporate some of this outside information that's coming from outside the Army into kind of how we build better teams, how we have a sense of meaning, how we, talk about problems when we have problems. So it's a mix. There's a lot of freedom or latitude of movement for the commanders.
Todd, thank you very much for making time for us.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.